Hey, and welcome to Crushing Comics, the comic review show from the Comic Crush. I am Indiana Jones, with me Short Round. We're also known by our secret identities, Paul and Liz. Episode 11 this week, Liz. I mean, we're steamrolling along here after last week's Halloween special. Just think, in before the end of the year, we'd have got to 20 episodes. Shocking.
It'd be nice. Yeah, I know, huh?
Probably one of our longest running shows. Right.
Lately.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Obviously, lots of shows planned, guys. I should say that we have got some more stuff coming up. We are planning ahead for Hawkeye in November, which Liz and I need to have a conversation about at some point very soon, i.e. today or maybe tomorrow. But we definitely need to have a conversation and plan that out. And we've got Spidey coming up at the end of the year, which I'm really excited about.
Everyone's
I think
really
I was saying today, Liz, actually online, I put up a poll. If anyone wants to take a look at that on Twitter at the Comic Crush, which you can see just there. I have noticed there's an awful lot of Ben Riley comics coming our way lately.
There are a lot of Ben Riley comics.
I'm beginning to suspect that
it might not be a coincidence.
Yeah, I am wondering if we're going to get Ben Riley in. Like, I was looking at the January solicits today, just finalising the pull list for the patrons, which will be online later tonight, I hope, guys. Sorry it's taking so long. But I was looking at the January solicits, and it's just like there's at least, obviously, you've got Spider-Man Beyond in there, but there's at least one or two other Ben Riley titles, and there's other stuff coming, and I just think that maybe there's a reason that's happening. So I'm gonna, hedge my bets and say maybe Ben Riley for the new Spider-Man movie.
How much would that not surprise me? I mean, because obviously, we've got, over on Sony in the animated arena, we have Miles, Gwen, we have all those Spider-Verse characters.
Now we were due a Spider-Verse movie this year. That was due to be out this year, the Into the Spider-Verse 2, but it's now, I think, next year. But I think he's going to appear in one of those movies.
I think he's going to appear in maybe not a Sony movie, but in No Way Home, because he's one of the characters that wasn't included in the Into the Spider-Verse film. Right. It might mean that he's fair game for MCU proper.
Could be, yeah. I mean, no one knows. I mean, the MCU characters are like, the MCU has the right to use any of the characters as long as they're producing the movie for Sony, is my understanding of the agreement. So Sony gets to release the movie, and the MCU just gets the right to use the characters. They are like the producers of the film, basically, the production company, and they get to decide the sort of creative teams and all that. So, but I'm just wondering, Marvel never do anything by accident.
No, and the timing is, curious.
The timing is interesting. I actually think it's more likely to be the Spider-Verse thing next year than it is to be this, just because they also never seem to have a comic out the same sort of month as they have for the actual movies. But of course we do. I wonder if we're going to start getting some news of. I was trying to think what else. There was something else that kind of made my Marvel radar ping suddenly, because there's another character that keeps popping up, and I'm just like, hold on, is that going to be one of the mystery announcements?
Hard to say.
It is hard to say.
Jessica Drew, we haven't seen, anything with her.
True, and the Spider-Woman series written by, I believe, Carla Pacheco is very popular at the moment. Like that seems to be doing really well. yeah, so it's all up in the air at the moment. We'll wait and see, guys. I am not wearing a poncho, by the way. I am just wearing a blanket because it's bloody cold in here, and my heating is very noisy. We just had a guy in to fix the boiler and stuff, and read all the radiators. And the upshot of that is the heating actually makes a lot of noise when we switch it on now. So I haven't put it on yet today. I didn't want that in the middle of the podcast. So yeah, I'm not wearing a poncho. It's just a blanket because I am cold. I just wanted to point out, this isn't a Clint Eastwood impression. Now, on today's show, we'll be doing Knighted from AWA. We'll be doing Newburn from Image. And we'll be looking at the Human Target, which is something I like to call Liz when we're off air. We'll be doing all those today. It's pretty much it. It's actually a fairly light week for us. Liz, I believe you'll be talking about Dark Knights of Steel as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I actually haven't read much this week. I have actually been busy catching up on Peter Milligan's Human Target for an upcoming article on the website. So you'll have to forgive me because yesterday was a huge week. Now, we talked about this last week. Massive week this week.
Lots to choose from. It was a difficult choice, really, to narrow it down to a couple of books.
And I picked up something, I think it was something insane, like 11 or 13 books this week. Next week also looks quite packed. So I don't know, man. It's getting a bit crazy at the moment for the schedule. You think towards Christmas they'd actually start dialing it back a bit, and even again going through the January solicits looks busy.
Yep, no slowing down.
No, but I think a lot of it is to do with shipping delays, etc., and I was surprised that nearly every book ships this week. There were one or two missing, but pretty much every book this week shipped. So well done to everyone involved in that. Should we get on with the show?
Shall we?
Yeah.
Knighted.
Yes, that's what we're doing first. I'm not here for this today. I'd really rather be curled up on the sofa reading comics. So this is by Greg Hurwitz with art by Mike Texera. Get into the credits page. Art by Mike Texera. Brian Reber is the colorist, and World Design did the letters. Now, we've met Greg Hurwitz before.
We have.
Way back.
Lovely guy.
Way back in like 2018, but I think it was actually more like 2017.
2018.
So we did a brief interview, which I'll try and see if we've still got somewhere, with Greg. Actually about his novels. So he wrote a series called Orphan X, which is kind of a American military mercenary action series, and very popular as I understand, and I found him a fascinating interview subject. We talked about all kinds of things, including, to my great surprise, because I just didn't expect it to come up, mind control cults. And I remember asking him, because he talked about going undercover in mind control cults, and I remember asking him, how does one get into a mind control cult? And as he pointed out, it's not a question you hear outside of Los Angeles, or it's not a question you ever hear in Los Angeles where he lives. So here we go. He's back doing comics. I think it's
and he has he has a background in comics. He had written some that Penguin Pain and Prejudice series that was very good. The Punisher, was it Girls in White Dresses or
no, I believe that's his.
Yes, other bits and bobs, but those were two good stories that I've read and recommend.
He's done some Moon Knight as well. And in fact, he talks about his other comics in the back of this, how sort of interested he was in sort of Spidey, but especially Batman, which makes him a man after my own heart. And this is quite a Batman esque
pastiche.
So, I mean, I've got to say instantly, if you're a fan of, say, Ennis's work,
The boys,
especially
you know.
the boys, you're kind of onto a winner with this. It's done in a very similar style. The art is not entirely a million miles away from Derek Robertson's art. It's not to say Mark Texera doesn't have a style all of his own, because he does. I've met Mark at some cons before. He's a lovely guy. So yeah, what we've got here is, I mean, right away we start.
The first page cracked me up.
Yeah.
The first couple of panels just, you know, sum this guy up perfectly. And in a way that actually, you know what that reminded me of just a tiny bit was, you know, the first issue of Y the Last Man.
Right. Yeah.
You'll know why if you've read that.
Yeah. So we have like one of life's sort of
downtrodden.
I don't know. Yeah, well, quasi downtrodden. I mean, in that he's got a good, stable job.
Girlfriend.
Yeah, a girlfriend. Yeah, he can obviously afford nice restaurants. He can obviously afford to buy her a wedding ring. However, an engagement ring. However, she won't be sticking that ring on. No spoilers,
soon.
but
yeah.
Hey, they ain't getting married. And you know, I immediately felt a lot of sympathy for this guy. Like I did absolutely feel for him. And he's then kind of involved in a crime.
Haplessly.
And yeah, and we learn that there's been some sort of virus, and the people that have survived that virus have developed superpowers. So there's like 5% of the population has developed kind of odd or weird superpowers. And the city he's in, which is it New York? I can't.
Yeah, it's New York.
Yeah. So New York, their sort of chief superhero is a guy called the Knight, who is a very Batman-esque figure, and whom we actually don't really see that much in this issue. There's also a rising sort of tide of people who are kind of biohacked, so they're enhanced individuals who graft, you know, cybernetics and mechanics onto their body in an effort to kind of differ themselves from both the kind of general population and the emerging superheroes. And into this, the Knight appears. Unfortunately, I mean, how much can we give away about this?
I mean,
because I think that to talk about it, you've kind of got to give it away. But
I mean, it's in the solicit. It actually, you know, it spoils it in the solicit. So I don't know. I think it's kind of fair game.
Yeah. So the Knight dies basically, or is injured severely, and when his Batmobile style car turns up to pick him up, it also kind of snaps up Bob, who's trying to help this guy.
Well, Bob is also the source of his misery, because
Bob
trying to do the right thing, he you know, haplessly again manages to end the night with you know, completely by accident. And whilst the Knight is doing something, you know, quite unsavory.
Yeah. I think that there's a kind of there's a very familiar feel to this. I like it. Funny enough, there's another kind of revisionist comedy superhero book out this week called My Bad, which I also picked up but haven't read yet. And when I popped into Gosh to get my comics, I was told, oh yeah, that's actually a really good one and it's definitely worth reading. So it's a similar, I guess, a similar tone to
premise
this.
or
yeah. And yeah, actually, I've only just caught on to the fact that why the Knight was where he was. Yeah, that's, you obviously you're much more in tune with that stuff than I am, Liz.
Yeah,
right up your alley. Yes, I suspect it's a very kind of thing that Liz loves to see in comic books. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, it was a good book. It was very entertaining. Again, one feels a massive amount of sympathy for Bob, and I love, like, there is a version of Alfred in this story, who's
Nothing like
demeanor.
Alfred.
Yeah,
But...
well, you know, they've got the same pithy tone, I like to think.
Right.
But I loved his reaction, you know, learning that the knight was dead. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And again, it takes me back to that issue of The Boys, funny enough, where the I can't remember the name of the superhero. He just wants to have sex with everyone and everything.
Is it Tech Knight or because
yes,
the Batman?
that's it, yeah,
the Batman
Tech
sort of
Knight.
Iron Man amalgam is Tech Knight.
Yeah, who you know, they actually find out he's got like a massive brain tumor, and it's making him kind of act very impulsively. So that's where the book kind of landed for me. I really liked it. It's
very funny. Like, it made me laugh. Like, you know, I mean, that whole sequence in the car, you know, where the knight's body is flying around and keeps landing in the wrong places. It's a funny book. It's like, it's not what I expected, really, from Greg Hurwitz, because, you know, the stuff I've read of his has been a more serious tone. Whereas it's not pure comedy, but it's like, it's got quite a, you know, bit of humor in it. And this, you know, this sort of hapless protagonist who, you know, it's very, very easy to dive into. There's just really, like, you know, it kind of hooks you right away. Right away, you're right there with Bob. You like Bob, and you know, and by the end of it, it's like, oh, okay, all right, I'm on board for this. This is cool.
And you know, it starts setting up the kind of arch nemesis right away as well, which was done very kind of economically. Story wise, and I really quite like that.
And great cover too, like you know, that which I think The Boys did the same thing with the Dark Knight Returns cover. Like, there's an issue of The Boys that has that same cover.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good book. It's a strange one because I don't think AWA have done too many superhero books. They tend to focus more in the sort of horror crime arena. And of course, well, actually, no, I think they've done some. I think some of Straczynski's stuff that he's doing for them is a horror book. Has been, sorry, superhero book. So yeah, it's not entirely a million miles away now. I think about it. But yeah, overall, I liked it. I think it's, if you like those sorts of books, it's worth getting, and definitely worth you kind of investigating. And all of AWA's books are on the more reasonable end of comic prices these days. You know, they're all $4, which is something I'm very grateful for, because you look at some publishers and it's like, you know, $5 a book at the moment, which is crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. You're getting a slightly longer book usually for that, and sort of a nice cardstock cover and things. But I'd rather have less book, cheaper cover.
Right, yeah. So I can afford more comic books. You know, for sure, yeah. But
yeah, and I think, well, I mean, for me, it's not too bad. You know, I buy my comics, I get a discount and all that. But yeah. I think for the average punter, it's becoming a very expensive medium, and you kind of got to watch that, because everyone's kind of decided they're Marvel right now, and they all want to charge Marvel prices. And it wasn't good when Marvel were doing it, to be brutally honest. So. I mean, you remember, like, when you used to get loads of those sort of $8 and $10 books from Marvel in a single month, and it's just like, sometimes in a single week, it's just like,
yeah, no, it's brutal, you know, and that adds up. I mean, that's the price of like an Image book, like a, you know, Image Volume 1, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is. I think it is lunacy, and I think sometimes the physical quality of the book, not the actual quality of the text or the art or any of that, the physical quality of the book does not always match the price, especially with Marvel. They're not very good at putting decent covers on their books. They're very flimsy. So I kind of wish they buck up a bit. But hey, I mean, you can't have everything. What book would you like to do next, Liz?
Okay, so moving on from Knighted, which I do recommend. I thought it was a load of fun. And you know, probably the, like, you know, the lightest book that we read this week, in tone. I'd say let's move on to Newburn, which is kind of the opposite.
Very much the opposite. So this is by Chip Zarsky, and Jacob Phillips. This actually, I think, is kind of, they seem to have done the whole thing. So what I mean by that is, I don't know if Jacob is also writing, colouring, and lettering this. So there is also a backup story called Brooklyn Zirconia, which is written by Nadia Shimas, drawn by Zayed Youssef Aoub, and Frank Centovic is the letterer on that. I don't know if any of those guys had anything to do with the rest of the book in terms of colours or anything like that. But this appears to be, like, top to bottom, just Chip and Jacob. Have you read any of That Texas Blood, which Jacob Phillips is doing?
Not yet.
Okay, very good book. Definitely worth looking into. Jacob Phillips is, of course, the son of Sean Phillips. He's done a lot of work for Sean in terms of colouring and things like that on some of the Reckless books. Has developed like a really nice sort of career of his own. I kind of knew what to expect with this one because it was all in the solicits and all kind of well telegraphed. I love crime books. I would say outside of the superhero genre, they're probably my favorite genre. I lap this stuff up as much as I can. I've been really impressed by the quality of the crime books that you get now.
Which usually, especially if you're looking at Image, usually it's the other Phillips, the elder Phillips, with Brubaker, sure. Who kind of really have the reputation for sort of the gold standard of Image crime books.
Absolutely, yeah. But there's been some other great stuff. I mean, something that we'll get into in a bit because of the kind of tenuous connection it has to the Human Target. It is Parker. There was a great series, whose name I'm now going to forget because it was a series that I loved so clearly. It won't lodge itself
What's
in
the
my
series?
memory. Oh man, it was the one about the musician that accidentally kills someone and finds that he has a talent for murder, and as he kills people, his music gets better. It's written by Ollie Masters. Oh man, it only came out like a couple of years ago. I hate that I can't remember it. I loved it. I wrote a great big article about crime books off the back of that because it was so good, and I can't goddamn remember it now.
Well, I don't think I read that one.
It's worth. Well, when I can remember what the title is, it's worth checking down.
Right.
If anyone remembers before me and wants to leave a comment in the thing, please do. Tell me I'm an idiot. But yeah.
And that's Ollie Masters who wrote The Kitchen, which was another...
I believe, yeah.
Another good crime book, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, he's a fantastic writer. Chip Zarsky is very interesting to me because he started out as the funny guy, and he was the go-to quirky, funny...
I mean, he was the artist on Sex Crims, Sex Criminals, was his real break, in terms of all of a sudden everybody knows who Chip Zdarsky is. Yeah. He was known to me first as an artist, and I think most people first as an artist. And then he just started picking up little writing gigs like Howard the Duck and things like that at Marvel.
But yeah, and he went for
funny books, like as you say, the comedy books.
And then suddenly along came, I think it was, what was the book set during World War II for Marvel that he did? That had like the original Human Torch and Namor and Invaders. Yes, that's the one. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And as you can tell, guys, the show is completely off the cuff. We don't really, apart from reading the books, we don't really plot this out.
No.
Completely unscripted. Completely
spontaneity is,
spontaneity, or as I like to call it, 45 minutes of me going, Anyway, Invaders, and then he moved into Daredevil, which was the real shock because that was, very, very dark stuff, and he's taken that in really major directions and kind of reinvigorated that book, if not that character, because obviously, you know, we're now dealing with a different Daredevil and all this, and he's got a big kind of event coming up within Daredevil. So Newburn is the story of a mafia private investigator who works for all the crime families on retainer and investigates crime within crime, which I think is kind of a really interesting concept.
Right. And he's he's an ex-police detective, you know, who sometimes the police will still continue to work with because he's that good.
Yeah. And I kind of like that sort of degree of compromise. And what's interesting about it, as he points out, if he'd been working for the mob when he was a cop, it'd have been dirty.
Right.
But now instead what he does is dirty other cops effectively by his presence. And that isn't really kind of addressed in the book, but it is there. It is a lingering kind of thing. And it also makes you kind of think to what degree that crime is a necessary element in modern society. In thinking about this, sometimes I do come to realize that I'm not sure that any large scale society can function without an element of crime. Because crime is something that bucks the system. I think crime is probably a form of, and this is just me kind of thinking, so obviously feel free in the comments, or if you want to kind of tell me I'm crazy, Liz, I think crime is an acceptable form of revolution for most people.
Depends
whether it's
what
petty,
it is.
tiny little crime, or to other degree, larger crimes. I think crime is considered by people to be an almost acceptable form of bucking the system.
Depending on what the crime is.
So I mean, I have a particular distaste for violent crime. I grew up around a lot of violence, and it's interesting to kind of be around that stuff. If you've been around criminals a lot, you will probably notice that they actually enjoy being criminals. I don't always believe that poverty is the number one cause of crime. I believe it's way up there, but also like the criminals I've met in my life is they really, the fact of the matter is they really just enjoy it. And this is a kind of thing where, he becomes the sort of, he moves from being a cop to being a cop for the mafia or for the crime families, which again is a fascinating concept. And I really hope they're going to push into that thing. I mean, this is kind of almost an open shut case at the beginning, which is nice. I
really liked. I really liked that actually this isn't like, some crime that we're necessarily going to be following through the, the story, which is what I kind of thought was going to happen. It was actually, he solves, this particular case in one issue. But the upshot of that is really interesting. And what he walks away with from that is what was a surprise.
Yeah. And he takes on, which is an interesting thing here, he takes on a protege, which is good because that gives you as the reader a really good entry point into that world for the next sort of arc or the next single story. And the book is peppered throughout with journal entries. I suspect that the woman that he takes on as a protege is the person making the journal entry.
She is.
Yeah, because as he points out, her name is not her real name, and I love the fact that one of the entries is just
that's basically it seemed pretty clear by the end who those journal entries were being written by. So.
But it's a fascinating conceit. I like the art. I like this sort of quite naturally lit style that it's got, where there are, you know, some patches are a completely different light and shade to others. It's not a flat kind of or sort of heightened comic style. It's actually quite a realistic style. Even though the style of the drawing isn't necessarily sort of super realistic, but it is still realistic. It's not, you know, it's less cartoony than you'd get in most books these days. I just really enjoyed this, and it really intrigued me, and I think I'm going to keep going with this one.
Yeah,
I can certainly, you know,
it was a real strong first issue, and my first real introduction to Jacob Phillips,
really?
you know, as the primary artist on a book.
Yeah.
And I really liked, you know, like I think it's obvious that he's really learned his craft from his dad, but he, you know, he's certainly not aping his dad's style either. I think,
No.
you know, you can see influences,
Mm.
but he also really has his own look for the characters. And, you know, it's, as you said, there's that, you know, kind of naturally lit thing where it's like, you know, Sean Phillips, you know, there's a lot of, you know, sort of use of like heavy, dark tones in his work that, you know, that it doesn't really exist here.
And I feel like if, like, they're both quite painterly artists. But when you look at, I think, Sean Phillips' style, that is, and again, I don't mean any disrespect to either party. Sean Phillips' style is a fine art style, almost. Jacob Phillips seems to be an action painter. He's more like Pollock. He's getting in there, and I feel
it's
like
quick,
if he was doing this on canvas, there's a
quick,
speed
clean
to it,
yeah.
So you can see everything that's going on clearly, and there's no muddle in the images. Whereas I think, as you point out, Sean Phillips' images, you kind of really have to look. They're a lot darker. You know, I think you
more stylized.
Perfectly. Yeah, there's a lot more stylization, and I think Phillips' style is New York Street, late 80s, just after it rained in the middle of the night. Jacob's style is very much New York Street on a dry autumn day.
Right. That's well put. Like well put. I think, you know, I think that actually aptly describes, you know.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that. Like I just came away completely satisfied. Now the backup story threw me because I kind of skipped over the credits at the beginning. So I was just like, what is this, man?
Right.
What is this?
Yeah, totally different to
totally
to
different
the
style. Totally
main
different
story.
style. Yeah. Great use of kind of very bright kind of, you know, almost summery colors. I don't know how to put it really. But, you know, really well done. I don't know if those two stories are going to coalesce or if this is just a nice backup story.
Tough to say. Yeah. You know, I at this point, tough to say, but
yeah, because if it runs through like the next 6 issues and it's what? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages an issue. You know, next 6 issues, you've got a 32-page comic or a 30-page comic done and ready. So I don't know if they're even going to include that in the trade. I think it's one of those things that Image do, and Sean Phillips does this with the essays. Brubaker Phillips do this with the essays in their book. Those essays aren't present in the trade version, which is a source of great freaking annoyance to me. And I suspect that this backup story will not be present in the trade version.
It depends on how much it plays into the main story, I think.
But I'm kind of calling it now, and I reckon that's not going to be the case. So, Liz, would you recommend this series? Is that for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thought it was great. I mean, this week was full of great books for me. Yeah. I gotta say, like, you know, this was a very, very strong issue 1. I too am a big fan of, you know, of crime books. You know, and I think like, you know, Image, you know, at the moment are kind of, you know, putting out the best ones, I feel. Even though some of those Brubaker Phillips books have actually hopped around between publishers, over time, like Criminal and and others. But
because Criminal started at Marvel's creator
Icon,
and then eventually moved to Image. I think that's the benefit of creator own books. Now we have this interesting thing where Bendis hasn't left DC, but I think the exclusivity of his contract has ended, and he's moved to Dark Horse for his creator-owned stuff. So all the Jinx World stuff is now moved to Dark Horse.
Jinx World keeps moving around. Jeez.
Yeah, but I
whatever.
think
fair play to him.
It's a successful writer who can, like, with all due respect, can take money from a publisher to republish a line of books that were already published only like a couple of years before, and in fact. Dark Horse is straight in there because they're republishing Pearl, which was actually one of the best things I've seen Bendis do. I loved that book passionately, and I felt like I was like one of the only ones.
See, that's like Bendis's crime stuff, actually, because Bendis started out as a crime writer. I think a lot of people forget that he started out doing
also Goldfish. They're
all like noirish crime books. And right into his, sort of my favorite of his early Marvel works are like,
Jessica
Alias and Daredevil, which are, kind of an extension of his background as, as a crime noir writer.
Completely. And it's good stuff. And it's not out until I think January or February, but I'm going to highly recommend that you check out Pearl if you haven't read it already. The art by, I think is it David Mack or Malieve? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But it's incredible. Like, it's just so textured and beautiful, and the use of light and shade.
Malieve was doing Scarlet with Bendis, and Malieve and Bendis have worked together a million times, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was Malieve. I just can't remember.
And of course, didn't they do? Was it Malieve that did the run of Moon Knight that Bendis did? Or is that someone else? Probably.
I would not be surprised. I do remember that run of Moon Knight, actually, which was kind of cool. Like, you have Mark Spector with because he's a little crazy. He has these versions of Captain America and Wolverine that follow him around, but they're just in his mind.
I wonder how they're going to handle that stuff now.
I don't know.
Yeah, because obviously we know. I was talking to about this with a friend of mine the other day. We met up for a coffee, and she was saying that sorry, I'm only not mentioning their name in case they don't want me to kind of, they might not want to be mentioned on this podcast. So I don't know that for sure, but they will know who they are if they listen to this podcast. And she was saying, I wonder how, because we know so much more about DID now and dissociative disorders and things like that. How is that going to be portrayed once we get to the TV show?
Right.
Because that I think. And I suppose with the interconnectivity of the MCU, it would be fairly easy to have Captain America pop up or Spider-Man pop up or, Wolverine, any of these characters pop up. Well, not Wolverine. Not yet.
Well, not yet.
That's probably how they'll do it, though. That is probably exactly what Marvel would do, just to piss off the fans, is just have this fantasy version of Wolverine pop up. So from one quasi grey-haired gent to another, Christopher Chance, the Human Target.
Yep.
Now, Tom King on writing duties. Greg Smallwood on art. It also has, where is the bloody credits for the book? Just put them at the beginning, guys, for God's sake. Clayton Cowles on letters. This I was really excited about when they announced it.
Yeah.
It's a new Tom King book. I love Tom King stuff. I think he's one of the sort of primo writers out there. I think he's a bit controversial in terms of, I think for people, Actually, I'm not going to go into a lot of that stuff.
Let's not go into it. I mean, he's
I'm not. It's not something I
his
background
is divisive for some people.
But also his writing style, because he can be quite ponderous. I mean, didn't you have trouble with the Batman run? You weren't.
I did actually, and because I'm a huge Tom King fan. I'm crazy about his stuff, but his Batman run, I didn't dislike it, but it's not my favorite thing that he's done.
Right.
I would have to say, my favorite of his stuff is usually stuff like this, where it's a character that maybe not everyone's super familiar with. Isn't a mainstream character, but he takes it and he does something really unique and interesting with it, like he did with the Vision, like he did with Mr. Miracle. He also co-wrote his first thing that came onto my radar is one of my favorite books, my beloved Grayson series, which is like just pure joy.
So I have to say, we're now going to start a Liz bingo. And in fact, it can be a Paul bingo as well. Can we do any week without mentioning either Nightwing or Batman? Can we do it?
I mean,
can we do it?
Can we do it? I don't have.
I think I'm gonna run it as a competition and see what we can come up with as prizes. And if you get a full house, you'll win a little prize. So yeah, the Nightwing run with Seeley, was it?
Well, it wasn't Nightwing; it was Grayson. It was the title. It was when he was not Nightwing. It was when he was like, he's presumed dead, post Forever Evil, and Batman sends him on this mission to go undercover and work for Spiral, as a spy. And so it's a spy book, but it's just pure joy. It's just it's hilarious. It's him teaming up with the Huntress, who's a high-ranking officer at Spiral, and they're part of their cover is they're working at this girls' school. Who all these teenage girls are working on sort of earning their stripes to work for Spiral. But they all love Dick Grayson, obviously.
In case you're ever wondering why Liz continues to act like a teenage girl. That'll be it.
But I mean, everything it's great. If there's a great the Midnighter plays an amazing role in it. It's so fun. It made me fall in love with Tom King's writing. That was the first thing I read of his. And it's fantastic. If you haven't read it, absolutely go out of your way to read it. It's so good. As is so much of his stuff. And like I said about his Batman, I do like his Batman, but I have to say, there's other stuff of his that I like more. I'll hold up my hands and say that. But I too was very, very excited for him taking a crack at the Human Target. This as soon as they announced Greg Smallwood too, I love Greg Smallwood. I think he's so fantastic. And I think they're just perfectly paired on this book. I love the cover. This is just the A cover. There's a couple others, but
same for me.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's such a great cover.
And of course, the books it brings to mind, there is a kind of 60s pastiche to it.
Yeah.
There is this kind of slightly light feel to the book, which is unusual for a Tom King book, because normally they're not the lightest of books. However, it does concern a serious subject. So Christopher Chance has impersonated Lex Luthor in order to flush out a potential murderer.
Right, and to explain that, we should explain, okay, this is what the human target does.
Yeah. So the Human Target, if you're not familiar with the character, he takes on the persona and face of people who think their lives might be under threat, and flushes out the killers, and puts a stop to them.
But usually by getting shot at. He dies.
And that is his whole thing. It's a great character, and I think one that if they kind of committed it to television properly, it has been done before for TV very briefly, and I don't think it really worked out. If they committed to it to television properly, would be a fascinating series, since you don't. I mean, I'm just reading Peter Milligan's first couple of arcs on it,
which I've never read.
Yeah, so the first one is drawn by Javier Pulido. Sorry, we will actually talk about this arc in a minute, but it's context.
But for some background.
Yeah. And the first one drawn by Javier Pulido, the next one by Cliff Chang, which is one of the reasons why I grabbed the book, because as I've expressed before, I absolutely adore Cliff Chang's work. And it's surprising how little, until the sort of second arc of the second book, I think, you don't actually really see Christopher Chance that much. What you see are these personas that he inhabits and these other people around him who are inhabiting other personas. And the book is this kind of labyrinth of identities and facelessness in the face of the kind of modern American landscape. I will try and talk more in depth about this on one of the articles that I'm writing soon for this. I hope to get those done this week, because I wanted to get them out in time for this, but it's actually become more of an involved thing than I thought it would be. So that is Christopher Chance, but this is a million miles away from that, because what we have is the fact that Christopher Chance, this is sort of, have you ever seen the movie DOA? It's been made like a bunch of times. And DOA is the story of a lowly college professor who is poisoned and has sort of 24 hours to live and decides that he's going to solve his own murder. And that's what this is. So Christopher Chance,
except it's 12 days.
It's 12 days,
rather than 24 hours. But yeah.
And I really like the stylings of the book. It doesn't feel modern. It feels kind of set in the past, even though I think the most modern it gets is the sort of Lex Luthor's Apple style address to his to the press, and also the presence of Dr. Midnight, who was a lovely character to see. I haven't seen him in ages.
Yeah.
In the sort of technological JLI base. There's some interesting stuff with this. I mean, like, some stuff you normally wouldn't do, because it has no real bearing on the plot, seemingly. But, King and Smallwood let the guy who tries to murder Lex go on for
ages.
Yeah, it's
like 2 pages
1,
or something
2,
like that.
3.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like nearly 4 pages that he's allowed to kind of spout his stuff for. So I wonder if that stuff's going to come back, or if it is just a sort of decompression,
Right. I mean, I think it, I can see, a lot of, obviously he's commenting on, these guys who do this sort of thing in, in today's world, guys who strap bombs onto themselves and go into public spaces and accuse not just their target, but also anybody who they hold culpable as supportive of whoever it is they blame, the manifesto guys, who go into churches and shoot people, and that it's a comment on that,
and of course Chance is kind of a man without a manifesto, without beliefs or ideals. What he has is the work. He has other people's beliefs, other people's ideals, and part of the thing with Christopher Chance is he assumes the identities so well that he can tell the person hiring him things about themselves that they never knew. So he assumes their body language, their gait, everything. And I think Christopher Chance as a character speaks to that sort of whiskey at work, suited and booted
Mad Men era, sort of.
That I think there are maybe 2 actors really that I can think of that really embody that, and that is, of course, John Hamm and Clooney. I think they're the only 2 people alive that actually look like they're living that life. Even though John Hamm, actually, if you see him when he's not working, he doesn't look like he's living that life. He looks very very cash. But that there is something about that kind of, you know, he looks like a rich American CEO who actually doesn't really have to work. That's kind of that sort of louche kind of thing that he has. I think he's a fascinating character because I actually love that in characters. I think for dudes, it kind of represents a kind of idealism, you know, which, you know, completely misplaced and stupid and pointless, but nonetheless, that's what it becomes. It's like guys looking at things and wanting to be, you know, looking at James Bond films, wanting to be James Bond. It's, you know,
right.
It's that sort of thing. And I think he represents that very well. There is an air of Darwin Cook's Parker books about this.
Sure.
And Parker represents very much the darker side of that lifestyle. There is a kind of quasi-Warhol-esque element to this, you know, like the whole 60s art scene. There is something of this book that feels out of time and out of place, as Christopher Chancey's always slightly out of place because he's never himself. And it is a murder mystery, which Tom King loves.
Of course. Yeah. And as I love him, you know, I love him, you know, him doing murder mysteries. And even when you say out of time, even though it doesn't have the, you know, kind of 1960s, 70s feel that some of the other bits of the book have, even the team that we reveal is to be involved later in the book is really not of our time either.
And yeah, I mean, I think we can reveal this because it has pretty much been done in the ads and in the run up to the book. It is the JLI. Right. So it's the original 80s JLI, you know, Rocket Red. I think even like Fire and Ice are there.
Yeah, Martian Manhunter, Guy Gardner.
I can't remember the name of the Green Lantern.
Booster Gold.
Yeah,
Booster
Beetle,
Gold. You know,
Batman, Captain Atom. I mean, there you go.
Yeah.
Black Canary, is it? That's was also on that too.
Mr. Miracle,
which must have been a nice touch for Tom King.
Yeah,
to be able to write Mr. Miracle again. But it you know, it's different versions of the characters than we're used to. I'd be kind of keen to see how much he does with Booster and Blue Beetle, considering his
Heroes in Crisis.
Yeah, Heroes in Crisis, and the Batman element where that Booster Gold featured in. Yeah, I love Smallwood's Guy Gardner here. That's a great guy.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, Smallwood's so good. Like I love his work. I think he's so good.
Terrific.
Yeah, I was thrilled to hear, you know, that he was doing it, and Batman too.
Yeah, so Batman, it is the JLI lineup from Maguire and J.M. DeMatteis. It's very much a first issue. I'm in for all 12.
It's a great first issue.
It's a great first issue. I'm in for all 12. The colors on this are amazing. It's these big blocks of color.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I adore. Yeah, and it's a beautifully lit book, if you like. You know, yeah,
I love like Lex Luthor's role in it. You know, I love how he manipulated it to be his own execution. You know, so that all of that he planned. He put the ideas in everyone's heads just to undermine this group that, you know, is against his business.
Yeah.
You know, it's so Lex Luthor. And of course, Lex Luthor, but, you know, from what we are told in this first issue, it was the actual target, you know, of the poisoning as well.
So also, there's one nice little Easter egg here that I want to point out. I should have grabbed the issue because I've got it in my collection. But this panel here, you can't really see it, guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and bring it up as close as I can. But I don't know if you can see the portrait of Lex Luthor that's there on the wall. That pose. That is actually the cover to James D. Hudnall's and Eduardo Barreto's. Sorry, I'm all over the shop tonight. James D. Hudnall's and Eduardo Barreto's Lex Luthor and an unauthorized biography, which is a great prestige format one shot from I think around 1988. It's a great issue. I love it, and it's one of those things that I keep trading in and then keep buying.
Okay.
Because it was I think it was one of the first comics I brought. Like I remember it's one of the first comics where I kind of, I want that. That looks interesting. And it's Superman free. There's Clark Kent, but no Superman in it. And it's about a guy who wants to write an unauthorized biography of Lex Luthor. And of course, as he digs deeper and deeper, he finds some incredibly shady stuff. And makes himself a target. It's a fantastic book. If you ever get the chance, I think it got republished in like one of a recent Lex Luthor for President trade or whatever it was. There was a fairly recent trade in the last.
I'll have a look at that and see if I can find it in the back issues, because we have we have a crazy selection of back issues. So I'll have a dig and see if I can find it there.
I will send you a photo of the book. I'll dig it out and send you a picture. But it's worth kind of reading.
Yeah, but Human Target, fantastic first issue, well, I just want to, I want us to be able to wrap it up pretty quickly, because I still want to very briefly mention Dark Knight of Steel.
Yes, go for it.
I'll have to do it rapid fire, but okay. Dark Knight of Steel.
Liz, don't worry about the time. Don't worry about the time. The time is my concern.
Dark Knights of Steel. This was one that I really wanted to. I was gonna read it. It's it's in my my standing order at That's anyway. I was I've been looking forward to this, and I have to say I was so not let down. So it was really hard for me to pick a favorite book this week, but this between this and Human Target, Dark Knights of Steel was better than I hoped for. It's it was just great. I don't want to give too much away about the plot. Okay. But basically what it is Game of Thrones with your primary DC characters. It's and done really well. It reminded me a little bit of 1602 in a certain sense. You kind of, as you're being introduced to certain characters, it's it's not immediately apparent who they're talking about until you actually meet them. So It's got that quality that Marvel 1602 had about it that I really loved. But yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Tom Taylor and his Elseworldsy kind of work, which I really am, I love when he does stuff that's kind of outside, off the beaten path, outside continuity, where he can kind of just set his own rules. I think he's that's what he does best. So pick up this book if you can. It's it was a joy, from start to finish.
It's in the pile down there.
Yep.
I'm hoping to get to it before the weekend. I'm not sure I will. I've got a very busy weekend. So yeah, that is Tom Taylor, and is it Yasmin Putri doing the art?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Who does amazing covers. It's
amazing covers. The book itself is beautiful. I really can't wait for the next issue of this one. I really can't. I don't know. I think it's another one of 12, which is great. I love maxi series. I think a 12-issue maxi series is just right,
It's interesting to watch some publishers actually move back down the scale, and they're now sort of shrinking down to 4. Like Dark Horse are largely just doing 4 and 5 issue minis. Image are moving to sort of a lot of 5 issue minis. But DC are amping it up. They're going for it, But yeah, good books all round. Really enjoyed them. Liz, you got pick of the week?
Really strong week, I would say. For me, it's got to be between Human Target and Dark Knights of Steel. Those were both excellent. But every book, it was a really good week for me. I really liked all the books we covered. I thought Newburn was really fantastic too. I loved Knighted. Knighted was just really fun. So great week.
Yeah, I think for me, Newburn this week. If I have to pick one, definitely Newburn. I just really enjoyed it, and of course the crime element of it was up there for me. Close second, Human Target, definitely. Not read Dark Knights still yet, but I will. Yeah, I think that's it from us, guys. Please do follow us on Twitter at The Comic Rush, or Liz at Liz C. Jordan. You can find Liz's website, lizcjordan.com, where she's got a lot of kind of back catalogue of reviews and things like that. And yeah, catch up with the Comic Rush website. There's articles and things going up there all the time, new trailers, whatnot. Yeah, so give it a look. I'm sorry, I'm a bit off my game this week. I'm just, I don't know why. I'm just not. I'm just not. It must be because I'm bloody cold.
I get my books at That's Entertainment in Worcester. Paul gets his books at Gosh Comics in Central London.
Both shops worth checking out if you're in either of those areas. And I guess we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, we'll see you later, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the podcast listeners as well. Do remember to check out comiccrush.com. Check out the Patreon, because that helps us out to know